We can now put the bottom bracket straight back in. I'm going to put some thread prep onto the threads before I put this cup in. That just means that if it's 100 years before this is taken out again, it'll still come out. And I've actually pulled apart bikes that are 80, 90, 100 years old. And if they've been put together by a skilled bike mechanic in the first place, everything just comes apart perfectly because it's been done this way. So I wind it back in, which is anti-clockwise, left-hand thread, lock the spanner back on, opposite way around this time because we want to hit the hammer here. Tighten it up as hard as you can by hand. And that's where most people, that's as tight as they get it, because they haven't got the locking device on the spanner and they think that's enough. But if you only do it that amount, one day you'll be riding down the road and that cup will unwind itself. So we just lock it on, couple of taps with the hammer. You can see how much more I'm getting out of it. If anyone else wants to take that out in the future, they will have to use that same method to get it out. The new ball bearings in cages are only $1.50 each, and that will be cheaper for your customer than the time it would take to clean the old ball bearings. Turn the bike around again. So we've got the long end of the axle with a new ball cage on it, and I'm just going to put that through carefully. And then we're going to put our protective sleeve back in. And then our left-hand cup with some new ball bearings. There's a right way and a wrong way to put these cages in. They don't go in either way. You just need to take note of how they come out and put them back in the same, put the new ones in the same way. Put some grease in there. Just waterproof bicycle grease. Any brand will do, as long as it's waterproof. For many, many years we used boat trailer grease, but then they started branding special bicycle grease, which is probably just the same grease. Use the adjustable pin spanner again. Now we just screw it up just so that it feels okay. Put a bit of that grease around the thread. Wind the lock ring on. When you wind the lock ring on and it seats against the bottom bracket shell, as you tighten it up, it actually forces the cup out on the threads. So you could think you had that cup adjusted right, and as soon as you tighten up the lock ring, it makes the axle feel loose because it's actually loosened the cup off a little bit. Hasn't unwound it, it's just pushed it out against the thread. So what we have to do is do the cup a little bit tighter than what you would think, as in a little, just an eighth of a turn. Then you lock the lock ring up holding the cup with the pin spanner so it doesn't turn, lock the lock ring against it and then feel it. It just feels a little bit tight, so we have to loosen it again. So it does need to feel a little bit tight rather than loose, so you have got some preload on it. But I'm loosening that lock ring without letting the cup move, and then I'm going to loosen it off just a little bit like that. And then I'm going to tighten the lock ring again. It's a matter of trial and error. You get very quick and very good at it. If I wasn't demonstrating this on this film, I would have well and truly finished this by now. It's a very intuitive thing once you've done it a few times. And it's still got the tiniest amount of movement, so it's not good enough yet. So we unlock it again, tighten it up a smidgen, reverse it, lock it again. Now it's right. Now we're going to put the cranks back on, so we're just going to put a little bit of thread prep or grease onto this axle, both sides, because it's a tapered spline, basically just held on by the pressure of the bolts we're going to put in a minute, and we don't want the aluminium crank to bind up onto the steel shaft. Left hand crank. And we have a washer. A crank bolt. And these have to be as tight as you can get them, and if possible they should be checked again after the person's ridden it for the first time, or after you've done your test ride if you're doing a full service on the bike. So we'll put the right hand crank on, we'll put a bit of thread prep on the axle, make sure the chain is in place there. Have the washer and the bolt. As tight as you can get that. So what we're going to actually do is hold the opposite crank, and you'll always seem to get a bit more out of the bolt on the other side. There's a fair bit of leverage there, but that's what you've got to apply. And the same with this one. And just imagine that aluminium crank, which is soft, being forced onto the steel tapered axle with about that length spanner, as much pressure as you can put on. Just need to put the crank caps back in. To a certain extent they protect those threads, but they're really only a cosmetic item. And you just tighten those just enough to hold them in there. I've already checked the pedal bearings, they feel pretty good, and if they weren't, they're only cheap pedals, they would be a disposable item. You would never service those bearings and those pedals, it wouldn't be worthwhile. Put a bit of thread prep on. We've got a left and a right hand thread. Right hand thread goes on the right hand side. Start it off like that. Left hand thread on the left hand side. Nice long pedal spanner. Put it on, pedal backwards to tighten them up. Once again, I'm putting leverage on the opposite side to the pedal and putting a fair bit of pressure on that spanner, and that's right. Same for this side. And that's it for the bottom bracket and crank removal for 3-piece cranks.